Okay, so today, day 7, our topic is, I said working with dates, but actually that's not right. Um, it's dates and time. The two actually go together, um, and can't really be separated, because they create an object called a date time object. So, and generally when we're working with dates, we're working with time too. So that kind of makes sense. So that's what we're going to tackle today. I saved it for the end, mainly because when I was first getting started, this was kind of tricky for me. I've um, figured out the object oriented way of dealing with dates and times, and that is a lot easier than what I was doing originally. So that's what I'm going to teach you guys today. And so hopefully it's not going to be that tricky, but we'll see. Um, So, I'm just looking, making sure everybody that's here is mostly people that have been here before, and you are. So I'm just going to skip over the 80/20 programming. Um, if you would like to follow along, here is let me put the links in the chat for you so that you can get those. I see some of you just jumped in on the handout. So chat has now the links to the gist as well as this handout. Your code sample is here in GitHub. It's actually a pretty long one today. And with that, we should be pretty much ready to go. So we're going to talk about daytime. Um, so as the old way of working with date and time was a function called date, right? And so you may see that around. Um, it's one of those things that we talked about kind of early with regard to 80/20 programming, and the idea that as new versions of PHP come out, they create different ways of doing things, and the old ways become deprecated, even though they're still there for some period of time, and still work. Date is one of those things. I still see it in a lot of places. But turns out that the new way of doing things, which is the more modern object-oriented approach, is so much easier and less confusing than date. Who knew? I had just really kind of started using the date time object here in the last. I used it actually on the webinar sequences that I showed you. But in sitting down and trying to organize the program for this class, forced me to really, really go through it in a lot of detail, more detail. You know what it is, right? It's like classic. So I've had to, there's a acronym, RTM, read the manual, and I'm one of those people that, programs the TV or whatever without reading the manual. So doing this class has made me read the manual, and I've learned so much reading the RTM, reading the manual. So if you ever see that when you like ask a question on a forum, and you'll see some snarky someone, they'll just type back RTM. They're telling you that, well, they're not going to answer that because it's in the manual. Anyway, so on the date time thing, I read the manual and I decided I really quite like it. So we're not even going to touch on date anymore because there's no reason to use that. This is so much better. So the date time object, there's actually four date time objects. Or four, I should say, related to date and time. So there's the date time object itself, which represents both a time and or a date. It's one object, as you'll see, that has one. And when I say object, it's just, again, think container. It's just another data type, similar to an array or a variable that stores data. The difference is an object is a little bit more full featured. If you go from in complexity, from least to more, a variable is the least complex, an array is more complex, a multi-dimensional array is even more complex than that, and an object can hold all kinds of information. In fact, the SDK is written in is object oriented. All those what we're doing are methods, and those are methods that we're performing on objects. So you're actually using object methods right now without even realizing that you're doing it, when you're using the SDK. So anyway, so there's a date time object which actually represents a date and or a time. There's a date time zone object which represents one of the world's 24 time zones, which we're very well represented on these in these classes. We've pretty much got it covered all the way around the globe. Um, I didn't actually even realize that. I mean, that seems stupid once you do. Someone tells you there are 24 time zones, one for all 24 hours in the day, but I just did not know that. Anyway, and then we have what's called a date interval object. And so a date interval object gives you the difference. Sorry. So, well, I say the difference. The best way to explain it is I did here on the screen is, so if we say something like 3 days from now, 3 days is the interval. Okay. That's called an interval. And there's an object that holds that information, as you will see. It's called the date interval object. And then there's something that we're actually not going to work with that much. It's called the date period object, and even though it is the period between two dates, it's actually we're not going to even do it at all. I mention it here, and then we're going to be done with this one because it's just not. I just really can't think of any good use cases for why we would use it. But I'll tell you what it is. So you can give it a date period, and so let's just say it's 365 days. And so it will return you, and so you give it a starting date and an ending date, and it will find you every date, um, each 365 days for between the starting date and the ending date. So it's if the start date is January 1, 2000, it'll go to 365 days from that is January 1, 2001, then 2002, or whatever the interval you want is. Sorry, not interval, that's the period you want. So if you want every 4 days between January 1st and today, it'll give you the dates of every 4 days between now and back in January. It's so it, you know it's just, I guess, if you were going to do a webinar every 3 days exactly, and you were going to do that for a long period of time, you might want to project that forward using date period. So if that's you, by the time we're done with this class, you should know enough that you can go figure out how to use it. But I just really couldn't. I'm going to show you some other things that we're going to do that without having to use that. I just couldn't come up with a use case, so I decided to not focus on that. But anyway, that is the fourth object related to date. The three we're going to do today are date time zone, and date interval. And these things are quite handy, as you will see. So the other thing I should tell you is that when you RTM, read the manual, you will notice that, well, that should be good enough. You will notice that it gives you two ways. That's not the one I want. Two ways to do things when we're talking about object-oriented stuff. Okay, the old ways don't have this, but this is not what I want. Where is it? The constructor. Try that. One way is, so here it'll say, here is the object-oriented style, and here is the procedural style. They are both working with the same objects. They're just different ways to do it. And if you look at this, so the reason I'm telling you this is that I'm using the procedural style. And the reason I'm doing that is because everything else that we do that doesn't have to do with objects is a procedural style. And so this is going to look and feel the same as everything else that you've been doing. Um, it's you use if statements and that's how you do your error handling. It's it's what we've been doing. Now, this object oriented style um, in, is the only place. This is what you're doing actually, and it may kind of look familiar. This is what you're doing with API calls, but that's probably the only place you're ever using it. And so because it's different than everything else that you're doing, I know that people are moving towards this. I get that, but especially right now when we're just learning, I just feel like this is closer to what you're probably using everywhere else. And so we're just going to stick with that. But just in case, so that if you look at this and you're like going to look something up, is the reason I'm telling you this, and you go, oh, wait, well, there's this object oriented, there's this procedural. Which do I pick? Well, number one, all of my examples are procedural, and number two, they do exactly the same thing. They're just two different styles of achieving the same thing. Okay. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, many of the examples, most of the examples, in fact, that they give you are in object style. But I have given you tons of examples in your handout. So hopefully, between that and the ones that you can easily find on Stack Overflow, you should be in good shape. And if you're in a bind and you're looking for an example or something about how to do something, instead of just typing in PHP, type in PHP procedural and what you're looking for, and that will almost always return you the example that you want. Okay, so that's just a little bit of housekeeping, and so from there we're gonna just dive right in. Okay, so creating a new date time object. So before you can do anything with a date, you've got to create this container that is going to hold your date time that you're going to work with. For each date time, I'm going to say date and time interchangeably. By the way, when I say that, I mean a date time object. So, if I've got a date or a time or date time that I need to do something with, then I've got to create a container first to hold that, and then I can act on whatever's in that container. Sort of, um, uh, well, I don't want to say it's like a variable. Anyway, so here's how we do that. There's a statement for that, and it's called date create. Pretty, pretty straightforward. Now, and you can and will most often assign that. I'm going to make this bigger to a variable, just so that then you don't have to keep messing with this. You put it in the variable, and now it's very portable and you can work with it. Okay, so if all I do is say date create, open and close parentheses, with no parameters inside this function, then what it's going to give you is the current date and time at this moment. Okay, however, and that's what this says. It'll default to now, the current date and time. All right. However, it actually does take parameters. And in fact, the parameters are super awesome because what the parameter that date create takes is a string parameter, which we just did strings, right? I'm losing track of, didn't we just do that on Thursday, I think? We just did strings, pretty sure. And yeah, we did. And you can write this in something pretty close to English. You can say, you can kind of jumble them around, depending on whether it's American style or European style, where they've got the year first. You can see 2013 0324. If I wrote that as 0324 2013, it wouldn't care. It's kind of smart enough to figure that out. If I wrote this as Jan instead of Jan 14, it's smart enough to know that. I can say plus 2 days, which is going to give you 2 days from now. I can say minus 2 days, which is going to give you 2 days previous. I could say tomorrow. I can say today. I could say all kinds of, there's all kinds of strings. Now, there is a, and I've put it at the bottom. You've got your resources here, date time formats, that tells you all of the kind of supported ways that you can write a date or a time here. And you'll see a bunch of them as we're going through the examples. Um, no. So Simon, it does not. Simon is asking, does it need to be in YYY month day format? No, right? This is plus 2 days. You'll see I'm about to do a bunch of them for you. And you'll see that if you just say plus 2 days or tomorrow, that it's going to return tomorrow's date, and it's going to return actually midnight of tomorrow's date if I just say tomorrow. So you'll see I'm about to do these. So the cool thing about it is that it takes a string, and that string is very human friendly. Okay? He says, how can it tell between months and years then? It's just really smart that way. It just does. It just does. So you'll see. And by the way, if it can't, for some reason, it will throw an error. But it's pretty darn good at parsing these dates. And so as long as you are, um, as long as you are kind of conscious of the fact that if it's at all confusing, then write it in a way that's not confusing, because you can write it in so many different ways. You can always put 4 digits in the year, and that, just to make sure you're not going to get an error. But as a general rule, it's pretty darn good at figuring out these dates. Okay. If it can't, it'll tell you it can't. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is we have to create a date. We leave this blank, and it's going to be now. If we specify some sort of a string, it's going to do its best to interpret that string and come back with a date. Now, this is really important, and I think it'll make more sense too as we go along, and I show you when we start to put things in Infusionsoft. There is a difference between this. You might say, well, that's a date. No, this is a string. Okay. It looks like a date. In our brains, it represents a date, but to the computer, this is not a date. This is numbers and letters and characters. And we know it's a string because it's in quotes. And it knows it's a string because it's in quotes. We covered that the other day. And so what it's going to do is it's going to take this string and convert it to a data type called date time. Now there are two different data types actually, as you'll see. In Infusionsoft, we have date and we have date time. They're different in Infusionsoft, but nonetheless, those are very specific, and they have to be formatted in very specific ways to be able to do all the things with a date that it does. So the first thing it does is it takes a string, it converts it to a data type of date time, which is what this date create is doing, and then you can do what you want. Which the next thing that you will typically do then is you will then use this date format. Okay, that almost always comes next. So what date format does is date format takes a date. This took a string. Okay, the argument here, if this is not a string, it'll say, you'll get an error and it'll say expecting string. Okay, this actually, date format, takes a date, which we have created and assigned to a variable called date, and it says, okay, so I've got this date. Now, how would you like me to display that? I understand that it's a date and I'm keeping it a date, but for you, human, I will display it for you any way that you like. I will format it for you any way that you like. And so there are all of these codes, many, 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 many different codes. In fact, here are all the code. This is actually not all of them. This is just some of them that you can use to tell date format how to format your date time. Okay, so you would use date format, a date, those codes, and if you throw echo in front of it, it's going to obviously print that out on the screen. So that's actually what we're gonna here, and here's a reference for all those codes. Okay, so we are gonna do that actually. Let's do some write some code here and see what we come up with. Okay, so I for this today's course I have a lot of examples. So you guys, I know that when I type, it's a little bit easier because that way you can keep up. However, there is a lot and it would be really, really slow if I typed every word. So I am going to do some cut and paste and I'm sure you'll um, not begrudge me that. So let's start with the first one. Okay. And we'll just discuss them as we go. So here's our first example where we said, okay, we're going to create a date. The string that we're going to feed it is 2001-0101. And then what we say is, oh, and did I really put these all in that? I sure did. All right, let me just change something, you guys. That is not what we want. I put those all in the wrong format. Sorry. Well, we're going to have a little lesson. So I put these in the object format, and that is not what we want. Okay, so we're going to change that. So what this is supposed to look like, and I'm going to have to do this I didn't do it to everyone, but I did it to the first few. So what we actually want is this. It should say um, date. So it should look like this: date underscore create, date underscore format. We give it the date, which we have created up here and assigned to the variable date, and then the format that we want it to display in. I'm going to concatenate that with some two line breaks just for clarity. So when we save that, this needs to be bigger. Oops. Okay. You can see what it gives us. Now, look what we asked for in the format. Y, capital Y. If you look at your little cheat sheet, you'll see that that capital Y gives you a 4-digit year. Then we put in a dash, and then we said M, lowercase m, gives you a 01 or well, I should say a 2-digit date, a two-digit month is what she was trying to say, and lowercase d gives you a 2-digit year. Had we used other codes, we could have made these 1-digit. We could have done all kinds of things with them. So, but we put the dashes in to say we wanted a dash. Similarly, we put a space here. So we got a space and we put a capital H, okay, which is for two-digit hour. Lowercase I is minutes and seconds with colons in between, which is exactly what we got. And then this capital P, if you look at your cheat sheet, let me give you get your cheat sheet back up here. So if we go to capital P, it's not on here actually, but it is is it? No. E in time zone. It is we may want to add that. I don't use it that often, which is why it's just was in an example. Anyway, that's the offset from what they call UTC, which is the Unix Universal Time Zone. It's essentially it's basically the same as Greenwich Mean Time, but that's kind of like the standard, as is Greenwich Mean Time in the computer world. And so, unless you start specifying time zones, which we're going to do, then like the default is to give it to you in Greenwich in an offset from that UTC code. So that's what that means. Now, why is this 0? Well, it's because we didn't specify here when we created our date. We did not specify a time. We only specified a a date. And therefore, what it's going to give you, this isn't actually nothing. This is midnight. What it's going to give you, if you don't specify a time, is midnight on the date that you created. Okay, so I've got some other examples here that we're going to do where we do specify time zones and some other things. Okay, so let's in fact the next one does. So let's do this one right here. And again, I'm going to have to change this one. You know what? Let's move all these in just so that we know that these are all part of that. Okay, so on this one, let's fix this. Let's take this date and move it and get rid of this. Now, by the way, if I ran this, you'd get the exact same result. But I want to be consistent, and I'll go back and fix your handout. I apologize for that. Okay, so in this one, all right, we've said date create. Now this time we gave it a date of a string of July 26, 2004, and we've given it a time zone. Now, so the thing I did not actually specify clearly is that date create has two potential parameters. One is a date time and one is a time zone. They are both optional. If you leave both of them off, you're going to get now. If you specify as we just said, just the date or just the date time, you're going to get the offset. You're going to get your basically midnight at your server. And then, but if you specify time zone, you're going to get just that. You're going to get that date time in that time zone. This is somewhere in the middle of the Pacific. So when we say date format and then date, and now again, this is the exact same formatting that we had previously. So now what happens if we run this is we get our date, 7/26/2004, midnight, but notice the offset is dramatically different. This is Chicago, or Dallas, actually. Dallas is where my server is, Central Time in the States, and this is somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Okay, so this is actually closer to all of you that are in Australia and New Zealand right now than it is to us. Okay, so same format, but the time zone changed because we specified a time zone. There is in your handout a list of or a link to time zones and all the various time zones. Now, by the way, they're very specific about which time zones you can use. Oops, you can't just just because I'm in Aiken, South Carolina, I can't make a time zone that says America Aiken. You kind of have to just figure out how to get close. So what they do is this is the list of supported time zones. Again, this link is in your handout. And what they do is they break the world up this way. Others. Oh, Canada is other. Oh, I guess these are like things that have weird time zones. Anyway, like I get it. But so for those of us who are in America, we go to America, and you'll find these are the supported time zones: America Detroit, America. For me, the one I always use because I'm in the on Eastern time zone. Here's America Los Angeles for people who are on the Pacific time. America New York is the one I use. America Chicago or Detroit works for Central Time, and Denver for Mountain Time, for example. But this covers, you don't have to pick those, but you can't just make it up. You've got to use one of these. Otherwise, it's not going to understand you. Okay. So we used Pacific Nauru in that particular case. Let's do another one. All right, start to change up some of these formats. So if we do it this way, all right, date create. So in this case, what I did is I put nothing in here, which is going to give us what? It's going to give us now. But specifically, It's going to give you now in your server's time zone. I'm not positive, but Ramona, I think it was you that was asking this question when you first started in the learners Facebook group about why your times were showing up the way that they were. So remember, if you are not specifying a time zone, wherever your server happens to be, chances are that's the time zone that you are going to get. Now, it's possible your server could have set a different time zone as being its time zone, but like for me, as I said, mine's in the central time zone here in the States. Therefore, when I print this or save it, as the case may be, it gives me the current date and time in the central time zone here in the States, which is currently 16:01:25. Now, notice I added one more piece of formatting here, which is a capital A. If I had made, which gives me capital AM or capital PM, had I made that a lowercase, had I gotten a lowercase AM or PM. So I just added that one in because we haven't had that previously. The fact that I have um, spaces in here is why I've got spaces and so forth. Oh, good. All right. Glad to hear that, Ramona. All right. So that's creating current date and time in your server's time zone. Let me do another one. Okay. Let's say this one. Now, this is another way to do it. Now, here up here, I left both blank. Remember, I have two and they're both optional. But if I'm going to do time zone, I have to put something in for time. I can't date, I can't leave, I just can't, you can't put in the second one without having something in the first one. So if I just want the current date time, but in a specific time zone, then I've got to put the word null in here. Okay. So I say null for the time and separated by a comma. And then I put my time zone open, which by the way is kind of like time zone create. I mean, time date create. It's our way of opening a time zone. And here I say American New York, which is my East Coast time zone. And I print this out. Now I've changed this a little bit. You'll notice that number one, I put a lowercase a this time, and you'll see a new different thing for time zone. I've put T, capital T. So let's see what happens when we print this. Okay, now we're starting to get a little more human readable. Okay, so in Chicago, it's 16:03:34, or Dallas, wherever that server is. But in Aiken here, where I am East Coast time, it's 17:03:34. And now I've got a lowercase PM, and that T took me forever to find this. It was not in the documentation. I read the manual. I don't know where in the manual this was, but I finally found it in an example somewhere. So don't lose that capital T. That's how you get your time zone in letters like that. Okay, so that is current time in your time zone, which obviously you would change depending on where your time zone was. So now we're going to do, oh, by the way, I've been forgetting to change these. I apologize, but notice that they have been running and they look the same. I should go back. Simon, it deals with daylight savings automatically. It takes care of that. It knows which time zones have it and when they are supposed to switch over, and it does that. Now, the only thing it isn't smart about, and you can go read about date time daylight savings if you want. There's loads of articles and loads of discussions about, how do you, maybe this is your question, how do you deal with daylight savings? Meaning, what happens when half of the world, or at least I don't know what it is in the UK, but like over here, 98% of the country changes, and Phoenix, Infusionsoft doesn't. Indiana, there's a couple states that don't. How do you program for that? That is way beyond the scope of this conversation. You can go read about that. Many discussions. But in terms of just, will it adjust when daylight savings time changes in your time zone, it will or won't, depending on whether you do or you don't. That is all built in. Okay, let's do another one. Now, let's see. Now this one's also kind of interesting to me. What we're saying here is that non-existent values roll over. Look at what date I put in. 02/30, February 30th. There is no such a thing as February 30th, right? So any idea what this is going to print when I save it? Let's see. Okay. Interesting. 3/1. But I put 2/30. Yeah, exactly, Simon. So what it does is it says you didn't really mean February 30th because there's no such thing. So that's 2 days from the end of February. So you must mean 3/1. So again, that's what we mean by non-existent values rollover. It's not foolproof, obviously. I'm sure you could screw it up if you worked hard enough. You could stump it. But if it's just an innocent mistake, you put 31 in in a month that has 30 days or whatever. It's just gonna figure that out for you. Okay. Now here, I changed our time zone again. Again, this is my server's time because I did not specify a time. And I put a lowercase e, which is the third variation of time zone that I've shown you. Here's the offset, here's the code, whatever those are called, and then here it actually just prints what is in the name of that supported time zone. Okay, so that's a lowercase e right there. And let's keep going. So then now we're going to start to get into some of my formats that I use, and also some different kinds of strings. So for example, we'll take both of these at the same time. Like this. Yeah, Richard is asking, will it move 2 days forward in 2001 because it's not, because will it deal with a leap year? I am certain that it will. So we'll look at it when we save the next time, because I do know it deals with leap year. It would help if I also echoed these, right? Well, yeah, all right. I was actually just using these for reference, but we'll go ahead and echo them just for fun. So I've said today, but not only have I said today, but I've said just the string I've used is 10:36 p.m. So what that's going to give me, because I haven't specified a date, but I have specified a time, is it's going to give me 10:36 p.m. today, and I've used the New York time zone, so it's 10:36 East Coast time. Now, for tomorrow, I've been slightly more specific. I've said tomorrow at 11 a.m. in the East Coast time zone. So now if I hit save, I get a could not be converted to string. Wait a minute. Time zone open. Oh, maybe that's why I didn't echo them to begin with. Hang on. Yeah, that's why I didn't echo them to begin with. Let me just keep going here for a second. And I'll show you what that's about. So if we do this, let me just keep going, and I think I'm about to just solve that problem, but we'll see. Let me add this. Okay. So I'm calling this for now infuse date, meaning only so that you you recognize this as being the date format that Infusionsoft takes. Now there's going to be an API function that we can use further down that will take a date and make sure it's in this format. But if you just want to create the Infusionsoft friendly, the Infusionsoft version, it's this with this T in the middle with no spaces. And if it's not in this format, it will not go into an Infusionsoft date field. It'll go into a text field, but it will not go in a date or a date time field. So, and it won't tell you that is the other thing. You'll see. We're going to get to the API here in a bit, but the API call will not error, but there will just not be a date in your field. So you got to always make sure the first thing you check if it's not working the way you think it's supposed to is that you've got it in this proper format for Infusionsoft. Now, I have used this variable today, which I created here up here as my string or as my date to format here. So let's just see if this actually works or if I've still got an error here. Hopefully I do not. I do not. Okay, perfect. So let's go back to Richard, your question about leap year. I believe it was previously 301, now it's 302, right? So I think it did jump it up one. And here it gave us our Infusionsoft formatted date. 1:18, which is today, current time in the New York time zone. Okay, 20. Oh no, the one I asked for. Sorry, 10:36 p.m. in the New York time zone. You guys see that? See how that's all working? Okay, we're got just a couple more, and then we're gonna move on to like what do we do with all these dates? Okay. But I think this formatting is pretty important because it's surprising how many times we have to print dates in fields or on emails or what have you. And I'm never sure if that's just the business I'm in because I do a lot of event type stuff and my clients seem to do a lot of event type stuff, but I suspect that that's really not unique for me. So this next one is one that for those of you who use plus this, you see that they have functions for humanizing dates. Well, all that is just the way that all these date things are just the codes that you use. So here is the code for humanizing a date. Now you could also shorten it and get like DEC 20th or whatever with a different code, but this is the one that I typically use for merging into emails. So if you've ever noticed the emails that come about the webinar and you'll say the webinar is coming up on December 20th, this is how I do it. I'm storing all of these different formats in different fields in Infusionsoft so that I can use them as merge fields in the emails. Okay, so today, capital F, lowercase js is going to give you December 20th. By the way, this one was also not hugely obvious when you read the manual. So today is January 18th in human date. Let's do another one. This is human time. 10:36 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, it's because in today, I specified a time, not today's date, but a time, and therefore I'm getting 10:36 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is what I specified. There is your format for that. This one I already did. Infusionsoft date, so I don't know why I'm redoing that one. We're not going to redo that one. Did I have a point to that? The only difference between this one and the other one is that it uses tomorrow instead of today. I'll just go ahead and stick it in there. Why not? But let's go ahead and do the last one while we're at it, just to save some time here. So the last one I have, this is what I call this my date or tag date very often because I use this format everywhere. I use it in almost every file that I save starts with this format. In my Dropbox, for example, because that way everything's sorted neatly for me. I use it in all of my tags. All of my event tags will say, if you look at event registered, event attended, event not attended, they all will say 2013, 1219, 8020 PHP, not attended, or something like that. So I use these everywhere, and therefore I use this a lot. Capital YMD together, no spaces, without, oh, this is specifying tomorrow at 11 a.m. So if I save that, there's your Infusionsoft date for tomorrow, and there is tomorrow. Now notice it left off all the time components of this object because I didn't tell it to output those. They're still in there, by the way. Every single one of these has the complete object. We're just saying filter it this way, format it this way for our purposes. Okay, everyone kind of understand date format? I assume. Any questions on that before I move on? Nope. Okay. Well, hopefully that gives you enough examples that probably most things that you are looking for, you can find in there, some combination thereof. My dogs have GPS collars, which tell you when they're not where they're supposed to be. And Nessa just GPS me. This thing is so funny, by the way. I sure hope she's not gone. But it sends you texts. Their collar does, and it's so funny because the collar acts like it says, "Hi, this is Nessa. I'm outside the tag zone," or "Hi, this is Rose. My battery level is low." It's so funny. So I get more texts from my dogs than I do from real people. Anyway, I sure hope she's not gone somewhere she's not supposed to. Anyway, well, I know it is technology, right? I live in the middle of nowhere on a farm, literally, like, and but I'm kind of I'm obviously kind of techie, and like these, all these farmers and stuff. I will be out like trudging down the back roads at 6 a.m. trying to find the dogs because they've gone after a deer or a squirrel or something, right? And one of our neighbor farmers will drive by. What are y'all doing? Oh, looking for the dogs. Well, how do you know where they are? Well, they have GPS collars. They just shake their heads at us. They just think we are just something else. But anyway, they put up with us. They're very nice. Anyway, best invention, best money I ever spent were those collars. Okay, so now let's talk about changing a date. Yes, Ramona, very much Green Acres for sure. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, if you want to change a date, and by change a date, what I mean is it's already been created, it's already been set somehow or another, and now you want to switch it to something else. Okay, so if it is well, let me just do a couple different examples. So if you want to change the date part, okay, you're going to do it like this. Yeah, we'll just put it all in there all together. So let me get rid of this. Let's just clean this up a little bit. Bear with me. Okay. So here's what we've done here. No worries. So we've said we're gonna date create, and this is now. And we're gonna echo that date create and is just year, month, day. Okay. But then you'll notice the next thing that I do is I say it's called date set. date set. And we give it as a parameter. The first parameter is a date, meaning a real date, not a string, which we've created and assigned here. And then we say, what do we want to change it to? This, and in the format of year, month, day. That's what these are if you look it up in the manual, year, month, day. So 2001-23 is going to change this date to February 3rd, 2001 from today. So if I print this now, you will see it's going to echo twice. Here's today, and now here's February 3rd, 2001. It's the same variable date, but we have actually changed the date. And that's kind of an important distinction. It's not like it's creating a new date, or this is what they call a destructive um, a destructive action, meaning whatever was in there before, you've destroyed that and replaced it with something new. Now, great question, Simon. Simon is saying, would the time element remain unchanged? And the answer is yes. If I put, let's just do that. If I put behind this, in both of these cases, here and here, we can demonstrate that like this. See, we haven't touched the time. We've left that part alone, because to do that, we have to use this date time set. So this one is date set. To change the time part of it, I have to use date time set. So let's do that. So date time set, very similar. Looks like this. Oh boy. Either my husband has taken all the dogs to the mailbox, or we've had a jailbreak. Okay. So date time, here's our date, 2001-11. So which is going to be current time. And then here you can see it's very similar, but instead of year, month, date for date time set, it's just an hour and minutes. Okay. So we go, yep, we've got hours and seconds, so we should be able to see that. Okay. So in this case, you'll notice that the time changed, but the date didn't. And that's because it only affects the specific thing that we're trying to change. Okay. So that's date time set. Now we can do the same with a time zone. So to change the time zone, we're going to use, that says date time set, but that is actually not right. This is actually date time zone set, like this. Let me grab this. Okay. So what we're doing here is, okay, I've started this one 1/1/2000 in Anchorage, Alaska. And then I've done a date time zone set, and I've changed it to Chicago. So when I print it now, you can see it was, because we didn't specify any time, midnight in Anchorage, and now it's the same day, but it's 3 a.m. in Central Time. Same, all of these are the same variable. None of these variables have changed. Now, here is the last one, and this is probably, of all of them, I think the most useful one. And it's kind of like, why would I use any of these when I could use this? But there are times when you actually do use those. But the one that I like the most is the just using date modify like this. Okay. So with date modify, we can actually modify with a string, meaning we can kind of use English in a way. Okay, so here we have our date, 12/12/2006, no time specified, and I didn't put in the hours and minutes, although I certainly could here. We could, like this. Oh, look, some dogs just came through the dog door. Filled with dirty faces. Get down. So now if I hit save, so see what I did here. So here, what I did is, because I use date modify uses all those same kind of string things as date create. Anything that is supported in date create will also work in date modify. So all I've done is I've said plus 1 day, but I could say I could say plus 1 hour, and it'll, hang on, it's running. Go, go, go. There, plus an hour, right? I could say minus 20 hours, something. I don't know. Whatever you want, right? You could say tomorrow, you could say whatever, basically. So now you see you've got, now it's 12:11 at 4 a.m. So whatever, however you want to specify that, as long as it's within those supported formats, you can do in kind of plain English. And it just makes it easier, because then you don't actually have to do really any kind of math like you used to have to do. This is just super simple. So I like that. For example, one of the things, and I'll just give you kind of a use case for this exactly. One of the things that I need to change in my webinar sequences, this webinar sequence, is, maybe some of you noticed this and I just haven't had time, but I actually have it set currently to where it says, if you sign up at 4:29, it'll let you in this webinar. But because it's saying if now is, greater than the time of the webinar, it puts you in the next one. So if you're like trying to get in on this webinar late, and you put in a registration, it's going to put you in the next one. It's not going to let you in this one, which is actually not good. And so one of the things I need to go back and really do is say something, instead of like, if current time is greater than 4:30, what I really need to do is just say, if current time is greater than the webinar time plus 30 minutes or something, or even or even 2 hours. If the webinar is still going on, I need 14:30. I need the time to be 4:30, because we merged that into all of our emails, right? So I can't just say, oh, we'll just change the time by 2 hours. But what I can do is just say, if now plus 2 or minus 2 hours, whatever it is, you get the idea. So that would be a case where just using using date modify in the string would work really, really well. And I should really do that, and I just haven't. Okay, so that's about changing dates and times. Now, a little more on time zones. Let's do, this is useful. This is quite useful, actually. Let's do this little one step at a time. I'm going to get rid of this. Probably go to just coming out all that. Okay, so let's do this. Let's just start with right now, current date and time on my server. Central Time, Dallas, Texas, and I say save. So Central Time, 16:28:57. Perfect. Now, the thing is, like, perfect example is Infusionsoft. You guys know how Infusionsoft has actually chosen Eastern Time to be its standard, and no matter what we do in Infusionsoft, it's always based on Eastern Time. Well, a lot of times you may want to do the same thing. You may actually want to set a default time zone for your scripts. Now, your server has a default time zone, and that is in a file on your server called the PHP ini file, the php.ini file. But chances are you are not going to go change your PHP ini file, especially if you're like on a shared host or something like that, right? So you can actually do that at the beginning of your script, like this. If you say in your script, date, default time zone set, America, New York, what it is now saying is, I know your server is on Central Time, but for purposes of this script, we are going to assume that everything is Eastern Time, New York time. So now when I run the exact same two lines of code here, like this. Well, I don't even have to do the second one if I don't want to. Well, I will. If I do it like this, then what I'm now going to get is, because I've set the default, is you can see now it says, oh, okay. So now was Central Time, now is now Eastern Time, because that's now the default, and it will stay the default on this script for as long as it's running. Doesn't mean I can't say, I'm going to specify time zone, but if no time zone is specified, it'll use this default. And that can be kind of handy because it keeps you from having to like constantly put these time zones in, right? Just set it once and then keep going. Okay. So that is what that was about. All right. Questions on time zones or formatting or any of that before we move on? What time is it? All right. 5:30. So we got an hour left. We are making good time. All right. Comparing dates. So this date time object makes comparing dates really, really easy, which is one of the beauties of this thing. So what we're going to do is, you know what I'm going to do? Yeah, I think I am. I'm going to take this and I'm actually going to put it here so that we do, and I'm not going to comment that out like I've commented everything else out, so that we actually now have a default of Eastern Time. What the heck? So the reason what made me think of it is that this next example, I'm actually saying that, but we wouldn't have to this way. We could just do it like this. All right. So let's say I'm going to create a date for today, and I'm going to call it, I'm going to call that now, null, and I'm specifying a time zone. But now that I'm specifying a time zone, I could actually just take that all out. You guys see that? And I can also take this out. So I've got today, just date create is now, and then I'm saying our next class is going to be Tuesday, the 21st, which it is, at 16:30. Okay. So now what we want to do is I want to show you how we can compare two dates. And I will type this one out. So what we're going to do is we're going to use an if statement, a really super, super simple one. All we have to do now, once we use that, because when really what a date is, when you look at it unformatted, it is called a Unix. It's a Unix timestamp, which is, let me see if I can find this for you, because I want you to. This is why you can do this. Unix timestamp. It's the number of seconds that have passed since January 1st, 1970, which is, as far as the computer world is concerned, the beginning of time. Like before that didn't exist. So what all times are based on, at least in like Unix and Apache servers and all the things that we're dealing with, is this is the number of seconds that have passed since January 1. So this is universal, right? And because it uses the universal UTC, which is Greenwich Mean Time. So the number of seconds since midnight, January 1, 1970, UTC. And then it's taking this number and formatting it in all of these different formats that I've shown you. But this is really what the date is. Okay? So because it's just a number and it increments by a second every second, to compare dates is super easy, because all we're doing really, no matter what they look like on the surface, we're just comparing two numbers. Okay? So therefore, we can do something like this. We can say, we can just say if today is greater than next class, then, so we put our little parent or a little open curly bracket, and then whatever, if that is, remember our if statements, if that evaluates to true, then we're going to execute whatever is inside the curly bracket. So we're going to say echo too late, exclamation point, and a semicolon. Okay. However, if that's not the case, meaning that evaluates to false, we'll put an else in here, and we'll say echo, you still have time to register, semicolon. Okay, so if today is greater than next class, do this, otherwise do this. And then let's just put in another little echo a break here, just so we don't get all this goobered up like this. Okay, so let's look at that and see what it says. So if I say save, I still have time to register, because obviously today is less than January 21st at 4:30. So I still have time to register. Now, had that been a different date, then obviously it wouldn't have said that. So what I'm saying to you is you're using basically numerical comparison operators to compare these dates, because that's what they are, really. And so all of these things will apply: greater than, equal to, and so forth. Now, let's keep going with this idea. I want to keep all this. So now let's talk about, one way is to just say, is this greater than, less than, what have you. But there's another thing that we can do here also, which is called date diff. And again, this is actually one of those functions that is in plus this, that is fairly straightforward. So what we do is we say date underscore diff, and we just put in two dates. So we'll put in today, comma, and we'll put in next class, and end that with a semicolon. And what that's going to give us, this is so cool. I'm like such a geek, but I think this is so cool, is this variable. It's going to give us an array, and that array is all the different components of the interval between these two dates. I'll show you what I mean by that. The way we're going to do that. How do we look at the contents of an array, you guys? And yes, this is the interactive part. Type it in for me. Time to wake up. How do we look at what is inside of an array? If I want to print that on my screen. David, yes. Ramona, we could, but there's an easier way. Peter, that's not a complete enough answer for you to win the money. Simon, yes, that would work. So the answers, so we've gotten a bunch of, Simon says var dump, which would absolutely work. Print R is going to give you the nice human readable version. Ramona said loop, which is true. You actually could loop through this with the for each, which we do a lot, and then echo. That would work. All of those would work, actually. It's very good. So, but the cleanest, the simplest and most readable way is print R. So we're going to put this interval in a print R like this. And let's just show you what this says. So the difference between today and the next class in a print R looks like this. It's called a date interval object. and it's got the number of years, months, days, hours. I don't even know what I is. Oh, minutes, of course. I is minutes, which is weird, but it's because M is months. Seconds, weekday behavior, first, last day of, invert, days, special type, special amount, have weekday relative, have special relative. You can look up all these things in the date. Just go to PHP date interval object, and you'll see these, but the ones that we use the most are the ones that are most obvious. Now, so this is cool because what this tells us is that the interval between now and our next class on Tuesday is 2 days, 22 hours, 49 minutes, and 40 seconds. Okay, so what are we going to do with that? Well, Peter, I'll tell you in just a second. Actually, I'm going to leave that up so I remember. Well, one of the kind of cool things that we can do with this is let's take our statement that we had before about you have time to register, and let's build on that. So what we can do is we can say days equal. And then what we say is, you remember how we have this date format? Well, and remember how I told you in the beginning we have 4 objects, but we're going to work with 3 of them. We have a date time object, we have a date time zone object, and the third one that we were going to work with was this date interval object. Okay, so just like we can say date format, we also have the ability here to say date interval format, like this, and then tell it how we want it formatted. So we assigned this date diff, which is this array here, to something called interval. So we're going to put that interval in here just like we did. It's very, very similar to date format, right? Where we created a date and then we put it inside date format right here and gave it a format. Well, then we're going to do the same thing with the interval, only the formats look a little bit different. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say interval, and the way that we want to format this interval, we say comma, and then we say %a, lowercase a, days. And I'm going to show you what that means here in just a second, or how we got to that. But then I'm going to say echo. Let's just grab this so I don't have to redo all that. But instead of you still have time to register, we are going to change this to days. Now, notice a couple things for those of you who were here thank you, Simon, good catch. For those of you who were here on strings on Thursday, notice what I've done here. I've got double quotes here, and therefore I've taken the variable and I've put it inside the double quotes without having to do the concatenate thingy. And the reason I can do that is, and that I'm using that now, is because we covered it on Thursday with the double quotes. Okay, so if I now print this or save this, now it says you still have 2 days to register. So that's like one cool thing we can do with that. And so that was date interval format. We fed it the interval and we gave it a code, basically. And in the same way that we have all these funky codes appear for dates and times, there is a unique set of codes for date intervals, and you can find those. This is in your handout. It's at the bottom under resources. So it's down here. So if we go to the manual like this, so it always starts with a percent sign like this, and then here are the codes. So you can see an A here is the total number of days as a result of a date time diff. Okay. So we've got all kinds of cool codes here that we can use for that. And you can read about that, but basically that is how you would get that to print and be dynamic. Is you'd run that, and every time it runs, because someone submitted a form or whatever, that changes dynamically without you having to do any math. Okay. Now let me just see. I'm gonna do something else here, but let me just grab some of these. So Richard says, can we assume that we can find out what the reader's time zone is before calculating and displaying the day-date interval to the reader? This would take into account their daylight savings time zone. Yes, you can. And do you have any idea? We haven't covered this explicitly, Richard, but we've gotten close to it. We just didn't actually do it. So but we have done it in this class. So any idea how you might figure out where someone is and what time zone they are in? Without telling you, I want to know if anybody, not just Richard, can think about the things that we have done and how we might get to that. Ramona's on it. Anyone else? Ramona, how did we get to that? David's on it. Peter. Yeah, you guys remember, it actually can't remember. Yeah, I'll show you. So, yeah, the other day, Thursday, when we did strings, that's a different window. But remember that server super global that we did? And one of the things now, yeah. So there's a couple different things. When we run that, and we did that, if you'll recall, in fact, well, let's just do that. Here, we're just going to go off on a little diversion here for just a quick second. If I do, so here's the answer to your question, Peter. So I use a text expander called text expander on a Mac, and so I have it's up here, and I have all of these. I have all these little snippet things pre-made, and so all I have to do is type in the little code, and it expands it to whatever is there. But I also, in Coda, which is what I'm using, I have it. I never use it, but it's over here in my clips. If you're in Coda, for those of you who use Coda, and other text editors have a similar clip or snippet deal. So it's called clips. It's right here. And so if I'm here and I just double click on my clip, so I have like lorem ipsum and a grep here, and I just never use it because I'm just so used to using the text expander version. But anyway, so that's to answer your question. That's how I did that. So okay, so if we print our server, super variable like this, let's just look at what all we get in here. So here's our host and our user agent. And here is our server's address, which is kind of close. That's actually, going to be the server in Dallas. This is my IP address. Okay. Now there is also, so we could use that with, in fact, I have a script that I have a whole script which actually grabs, I don't know if it works, you guys, in anywhere other than the United States, that grabs your IP address and then goes to a database, a geolocation database, and finds, based on your IP address, what DMA you are in, what designated metropolitan area you are in. There's like 240 in the United States. Um, And so if you look in my apps, you'll see that there's 240 tags for each of the different cities, like major metropolitan statistical areas in the states. And it tags you by what area you're in, and it, so it uses, this is what it uses, and you can do this. We actually run it off of an Infusionsoft form. We don't use this. We actually just grab it out of Infusionsoft. So but I know, and I have not done it, and so this is just some, like, one of those things, if you're interested in, you can, by the way, see this request time, here's the Unix timestamp. If you're interested in that, PHP has some function built in. You have to actually have it installed on your server. It's called geolocation. And a lot of servers have it. PHP GeoIP. I have never really messed with it, quite honestly, but if you look at this right here, what this tells you is that this is an object, I believe. Let's just look at this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we're here, you asked. So let's just, region by name. Does it have times? Yeah, look at this. Time zone. Let's just see if this works, just for fun. Yeah. Oh, no, that's if it, we got to feed it. I don't want that. I want it to come from my server. All right. Well, I may not be able to spend the time on this that I want. But that, anyway, that's got to be close. Somewhere in this GeoIP thing is the answer to your question, Simon. So if you didn't actually want to use one of the free services, which is, or paid services, which is the easier way to do it, then there is a way to do it within PHP, but I don't know that it's always installed on your server. Anyway, all right, so I'm going to move on that. But yes, the answer is it is absolutely doable. Okay, just got to figure out how to do it, and what method to do it with. All right, keep going. All right, so where was I on this? I'm going to get rid of 555. Okay, I am going to get rid of this, print our server. Okay, and let's do this. So remember what we did here? So we used this date diff. We created that interval array. And then we assigned it that interval, specifically the interval number of days to a variable called days. Okay. Now, what you can do, and by the way, I have kind of gotten off the handout, but all of this is in your handout. I'm just kind of going down my code now. I cut off the handout really quickly. So what you can do is you can do a couple things. You can start adding these intervals or subtracting or whatever. So still building off of our today and next class, which we still have up here. Okay. So if I just echo today is date format, and I just say this, and then next class is date format like that, and I say save. Okay. I probably needed a break right there. Okay, like that. All right, so today is, next class is. Now, what we can do now is watch what happens if we use a function called date add. Date add looks like that. So we say, all right, so what, well, so the first parameter in date add is what are you adding it to? And we're adding it to this date called today. And then how much are you adding? And that's the interval. And remember, this interval contains all of this mess. So it's going to add this exact interval to today. So if right now today is 2014 118 at roughly 1755 and the next class is this, if I add the interval between these two to today and reprint this, what is going to happen? What is this going to look like when I reprint it? Any ideas? It will also add time. It's going to add it down to the second. So if I take the interval between today and the next class and add it to today, what is the value of today going to be? I've stumped you guys. Probably because you're thinking like, well, why would you do that? Well, let's just run it and see. They're identical. If you think about it, if I take the difference between these two and I add it to the smaller one, then it's going to be exactly the same to the second, because that's like these intervals are actually down to like the microsecond, right? So when I add it, then I end up getting to the same place. Now, what if, so that's just date add. Now, I could obviously do a different interval, but this kind of makes it obvious what we're doing here. Now, we could do exactly the same thing. We could do something like here, we can use date sub. And if I do date sub, which is going to find the interval between these two and subtract it from today, then, of course, the third time, it's going to bring today back to its current value. Okay? So point being here, number one, you can add and subtract intervals in that variable. All the information contained in interval, you can add and subtract those, use them to modify a date, but also that, again, this is, it's actually creating new dates here. It's not just like storing the old one and then adding to it and printing that. It's a destructive, so you just need to know that. The reason I could get back to where I was is just because it's knows its own interval. But anyway, so that is how you both add and subtract time from a date. Now I'm getting this interval, by the way, from an interval object, and it's expecting that. Truthfully, I really wouldn't use this very much unless there was a specific reason to, because there's an easier way to do this, and I've already told you what it is, right? Which is what? If I'm not being this specific, where I'm trying to add specific like days, hours, minutes, seconds that are calculated and dynamic, well, even if it is dynamic, what would be the easy way to do this? Anyone know? Anyone know? We've already done it. It would be something like, yeah, exactly, Simon. You'd use date modify, which takes a string, right? So now you would say, right, whatever, plus 2 days or whatever, plus 20 days. And then do it that way. Comma. Today, like that. And then if I echo that, well, I have to do a format. But anyway, I'd use this. Most of the time I'm going to use this instead because this is just so flexible. This is, I mean, I want you to know that you can do this. There's a date add, there's a date sub. But at the end of the day, it's kind of, this reminds me of like that request instead of using get and post. It's kind of just catches it all together instead of having to figure all this stuff out. But there are use cases where these will work better. So I definitely want you to know that those are there. Okay, we are gonna move to some API examples. Let me see Simon here. Yeah. So Simon says, how would we find next weekend or perhaps next Monday or next working day? Anyone have any ideas how we would do that? Anyone? Okay. Well, let's go try it. Let's grab one of these like this and say the easy one, the really easy one is next Monday. That would be January 20th. Okay. Find next day of the week that is Saturday. Find next day of week that is Saturday. Same thing. All I have to do is just say next Saturday. It's the 25th. So you want to know, so if we wanted to know like next weekend or next working day, we'd have to go look at this list of supported date formats. So if I say PHP supported date formats, golly, Kim type. Let me just start with that, and if that doesn't get me where I want to go, then I will. I think it's this one. Yeah. So this list, and I believe this is in your handout. Let me just check it. Where is your handout? A different window. No. I'm going to put this in here too. So these are called formats relative. So these are the strings basically that it can support. So, and you can see it says these are the relative date times formats that string to time, date time, and date create understands. So let's just look at some of these. So what you wanted to know was like how do we find next weekend, right? First day of January 2008, last day of last space, last weekday, last Saturday of July 2008. Hang on, I'm looking. 2 days ago, moves to the next day of this name, space week. Weekday plus last, Monday next week. Anyway, somewhere in there is how we're going to get to like the next weekday. And I'd have to sit down and read this to figure it all out. But this is your answers in here. Oh, wait. Here we go. Weekday is a supported. So looks like we could just do something like this. We'll just try it. So let's try next weekday. Yeah, Monday. So that's pretty easy. What if we said next weekend? Oh, doesn't like that parameter. Next, what was it that it wanted? Um, weekday, weekdays, day names. All right. Anyway, fortnight. Well, anyway, you get the idea. Um, this is how you do it. Okay. So and that's what I was kind of telling you. I mean, this thing's pretty darn smart in what all it can figure out. Okay. And it might not be everything, but if it's not, then you might have to start using some code. But it'll get you pretty far just using that date create with a string. All right. So I'll just leave this so that you guys will have it. Okay. So let's go do some API now. I'm just going to give you a couple of really super simple examples, mainly so that I can show you. I mean, the API stuff we're going to do is now less about the formatting and the creating of the dates, and more about the getting them in and out of Infusionsoft and what kind of the nuances of that are. So I've got my kind of boilerplate set up that I've always got using my Sandbox account. And as you know, I always pretty much start out by creating the current date, right? Now, so something sort of interesting that I just noticed because I've been working on this for you guys is that if you look at my boilerplate, you will that is published and in the screencast and everything, and is in all the things that I've given you. I always set the current date this way, which is that old date function. Okay, that is now I've really discovered is really so much harder than this new way of doing it. But this was the first way I learned how to do it, and I've never changed it, and I just have copied and pasted it since day one. So it still has this old date function. So let's just assume that we don't want to keep using this old date function. We want to hang with the cool kids, as John likes to say. So what would it look like if we change this um, to the new way of doing it? Now, I'm going to do it in a little bit of a shorthand here, because remember what we did. Here's the way we would have done it, right? We'd have said date create, and then date format. But because we're doing current date, we're doing now, we can actually kind of mush this together like this. Now, what we can do is we can say date format, and then what does date format take? Well, date format takes date, or a date. And how did we create that date? We created that date with date create, right? So instead of like going through those two steps, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to put date create right in there instead of a variable, and that's going to give me a date, the current date and time, actually now at my server. And then I'm going to tell it what format do I want it in, which is for now this one, right? Which is format here, and then close this and semicolon. So now what I've got is, if I echo these like this and echo like this, and probably put some kind of a break in here so that it's formatted like this. Okay, so now what you'll get is, I should close some of this stuff up, actually. Let me close some of this stuff up. On line 135. Oh, didn't like something I had here. I might have changed something. It was running and then I must have busted it. Anyway, it's okay. I'm going to close this up anyway. So we're going to do this. Okay, get rid of all that. Now let's see if we can just run this. Okay, so these give me the exact same thing. So this is the old way. This is the new way. And you think, oh, well, gosh, that's like a lot more stuff. It is a lot more stuff, but you have a lot more flexibility. Trust me, when you start trying to do stuff with this, it gets to be really tricky. And this is really easy. So we're going to just go with this way. So I'm just going to comment that out and say, this was the old way. This is the cool kids way. Okay? So what we have now is we have current date, and we have current date formatted. And what I always like to do, and so I'm going to do it so that I know as my scripts are running kind of what's happening. You connected at current, shoot, misspelled, current date break semicolon. All right, and fix that. Now, let's go further with this. Now, I want to show you this Infusionsoft date function. Normally, I actually put the Infusionsoft format here, but I specifically didn't. That's that one with the T in it, way up here somewhere. I specifically didn't because I wanted to show you the InfuDate function. So the InfuDate function looks like this: idate equals, and this is an actual, this is an actual API call that we're making here to get this set up right. So it's idate. So if anytime we make an API call, we have to use the name of our connection, the little arrow sign, and then we're going to call the method that we want to use, which is an InfuDate. And in this case, the only argument to InfuDate is a date, so which is current date. So if I echo this now, okay, so remember this was current date, and now I've put current date in the InfuDate translator, if you will, and said save, and now it's going to come back with InfuDate in that format that Infusionsoft requires, must have, in order to put it in Infusionsoft. Okay, fix that. Okay. All right. So now we have our, so that's InfuDate. So you can either just do a date format and do it by hand, or the benefit of doing an infusion date is if for some reason Infusionsoft should ever change the format that they require in their dates, I don't know why they would, but if they ever did, this is and I hate this word with a purple passion, but this is more robust than you specifying a format and then they change the format and it breaks somewhere down the road. So that would be the reason you use it. Do as I say, not as I do, because I actually usually don't. In fact, I truthfully had to look it up to be able to tell you. I knew it was there. I've seen it a million times, but I just never use it, so I didn't know it off the top of my head. All right, so that's InfuDate. Now, so here's what we're going to do next. We're going to, let's sign into Infusionsoft. Oh, this is not the window I want, but we'll just go with it anyway. And let me find my Infusionsoft window. Well, this will work. So we're in my sandbox account. And if I go to Nessa, dog, here, 133, right. So if I go to Nested Dog, I've actually created a couple of custom fields that we're going to work with in this example. And there are going to be 3 of them. Well, 2 and a stock field. So anniversary is a date field. And you can tell because it's just got a little calendar and it doesn't have a space for time. Okay. Same with birthday. Makes sense. Both of those have no time associated with them. Therefore, they are just date fields. In my custom fields, though, I've created what's known in Infusionsoft as a date time field. And you can tell that because it's got the date and then it's got this little drop down. And then I've created another field called humanized webinar date, which is a text field. Okay, so we've got 3 different kinds of fields we're working with here: date, date time, and text. And for those of you who have really not paid attention to that before, the way when you go to create custom fields, which you do over here in admin settings, and right at the top it says set up a custom field for a contact, which you could also do for companies and orders and subscriptions and everything, but we're just going to do it for contact. So when you say when you go here and you say add a field, and it gives you all these lists of the different field types that you can use. Of course, here's date, here's date time, there's also day of the week, which we're not even going to mess with, but I would really probably never use that. I would use a text field. Uh-oh, you guys, thank you so much. No, it's not you. I'm like on the wrong screen. Sorry about that. Okay, that tells me who's watching and who's not, because I've been sitting over here like going through this stuff on my other screen, and most of you didn't say anything. Okay. Get rid of your things there. Okay, so back to this. The place that I did that was here in admin settings, and I just said add a new field to a contact record, and I was showing you all the things in the drop down: date, date time, and text. Okay, so here are the fields that I created: first purchase date, humanized webinar date, and then I showed you anniversary date as well, which is the stock field. Now, I assume that all of you guys know that in order to work with a custom field in Infusionsoft, that you have to get the name, the proper name that you have to refer to in your scripts in Infusionsoft, you have to go here. It says view the field database names for the API. You click on that and it will show you all of the database names of your custom fields. And the other thing, they didn't used to tell you this. When I started, they didn't tell you, but they've added it. They tell you up top that you have to prepend custom fields with a underscore. If you don't put the underscore on them, then they won't work. So the way you can tell immediately the difference between a custom field and a stock field, which is what I call Infusionsoft fields, in a script, is the underscore in front of it. So here are my 2 that we're working with: first purchase date and humanized webinar date, and those have to have an underscore in front of it. So with that, what we are going to do, does it? Yes, Simon, it does add those fields to all contacts. And what I said off screen, so I will go back, is that, and I think most people do not realize this at all, is that you can not only add custom, you've only got 100 custom fields in contacts, but you've also got 100 in company, 100 in task, appointments, and notes, 100 in orders, 100 in subscriptions, and 100 in opportunities. So that's actually a lot more. Most people just think of custom fields and contacts, maybe orders, but I rarely see people use that. Oh, good, look at that. People just learned that. Awesome. So you can do that. And when you create it, you look up the name there. So once you know the name and you've got the contact. Now I want to I'm gonna write a little script here, but I want you to notice that in Nessa's record at the moment, we're going to change this, but at the moment I've already got values in here. Okay, I've got 12/3/2013 an anniversary, and I've got in the custom fields I've got the a date, time, and February 26th. Now I will also give you another little hint. I actually, as a typically, because I do it a lot, I use this anniversary field for either first purchase date or first login date. And the reason I do that is, and I sometimes change the field labels and sometimes not. I assume you guys know that you can actually change these labels. They're called system labels, and they're in the same place over there in, yep, you sure can. Okay, well, let's just do that since I don't want to, oh man. All right, you guys, I'm going to go over by just a few minutes. So would you want to see where these are changed, or do you want to see, you want me to just keep going? Okay, quickly. If I go to over here to admin settings, and I go to application, and you'll see right here, system labels. And if I go to contact, yeah, I know. It'll give me a list of all the fields in contact. So if I find right here contact anniversary, I can change this to first login and say save. You can do that with any of these actually. And so now when I go to a contact record, any contact record, and I look at anniversary, it now says first login. Now it doesn't change the field name in the database. It's changing the label, the system label. So when I refer to it in my scripts, I still have to refer to it as anniversary, but to the user, it displays as first login. Now, I'll tell you quickly why I do that. The reason that I use this is because when I am doing searches, there's something that you can do with an Infusionsoft stock field that you really can't do with a custom field, and that is this. If I go to contacts, you guys may know this, however, and I say start over and I get a search, over here in miscellaneous criteria, there is a miscellaneous criteria here called data exists. And so I can select a field, and you can see that these are only Infusionsoft fields, and not all of them either, by the way. But one of them happens to be anniversary, which I've now changed to first login. And I can say has a value or doesn't have a value. Now, they have the ability to put, you can kind of try to search on that, but it just doesn't work perfectly unless it's in this data exists thing. So I like to be able to look and say who hasn't logged in or who hasn't purchased as a search criteria, which is why I often commandeer Infusionsoft date fields that I'm not actually going to use, and I never capture people's anniversary date. So that's why I do that. So for me, that's generally first login date, okay? And that's relevant to what I am going to, that was a little rabbit trail, and I apologize for that. But it is relevant to what we are doing here. So let's get back to this. So I have these three fields. I want to check to see if those three fields are already set. And so because to save time, because we've got like 5 minutes before I'm late, I am just going to cut and paste. So we are going to put in a API call called load contact, which we've done each of the last several days, for contact ID 133, which is Nessa. I'm not even going to mess with the forms or any of that, get and post right now. I'm just hard coding Nessa in there right now. And so load contact is what you do when you know the contact you want to look at, and you say, what fields do you want to look at? What values do you want me to return? You put that in an array. So I want these three fields: first purchase date, humanized web date, and anniversary. Okay. Notice it's still anniversary, even though we changed the system label. So I want it to go for Nessa, go get those, and then put those in a array that we call, well, I messed that up, that we call condat. Okay, so if I say now run, what you're going to see is, oh, come on. You know, I wonder if there's like a meter on here, because it seems like every time we're getting to the end of our class, I try it again, that stops working for a second. So hang on, it did this to us last time. I don't know why. Maybe my internet connection is just being funky. Let me do this. I think this is what we did last time. I think we just said, I remember, we did this and I copied it because I'm going to lose it, and we just closed it and said don't save and disconnected the server and fired it up again. See what happens. Nope, still can't get to the server. Oh, come on. I was so close to finishing. I was so close to finishing this. All right, well, here's what we're going to do. There is more than one way to skin a cat. Oh, wait, let's see. No. Yeah, okay. We're back together. All right, let's try again. I was going to switch to a different server if I had to, but looks like I don't have to. So I'm going to do all. I'm going to do paste. And I'm going to put a preview window back over here and save. Please save. Yes, okay. There. Okay. So what you're getting back from this is it's saying, now notice the format of these dates. It's the same. It's, even though anniversary is a date field, it's still returning it back in this InfuDate format. This is a text field, February 26th, and this is what is set in that date time, right? So it is, so there's my array condat from loadcon. All right, so what that is saying is there's actually, I know there are values in those, and we know it because we just went and looked at them, right? So I'm going to take some of these values out, and I'll show you why I'm going to do that in a second. Because what we're going to do is, this is a use case that I think is something you'll use fairly often. Something similar to it anyway. Custom fields. So what we're going to do is we're going to take out the webinar human date, and we're going to take out this first purchase date time thing. I guess I can't really take that all the way out, and save that. Okay, now if I rerun this now, anniversary should still have a time, which it does, but those two went away because they're empty. Perfect. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm going to start from. So you can see what I've said. I've said check to see if these fields are already set. I do that to begin with by doing a load, a contact load, and then I'm saying if they are not set, I want to set them. Okay, so how are we going to do that? If they are not set, set them. Well, so the first thing I need to do is I need a value for that humanized date field, and so I'm going to put that here. And this could be something dynamic or whatever, but I'm calling this our next webinar, and that this is the humanized version. So all I've done is very similar. I've got a date create with this string using date format, and then that humanized thing. I've just taken the two statements and mushed them together in the same way that I did up here. Okay, it's what we've been doing, but now we're just mushing them together in one line. I'm calling that variable webinar human or web human. And then, oops, I'm going to clean this up with a couple breaks like this. And Okay, so then what we're going to do is, here's the clue. If not, set them. So what comes next is almost certainly going to be an if. Now, I'm going to do this way. I'm going to say exclamation point. I'm going to do it two different ways, actually. I'm going to say exclamation point, which means what, you guys? We covered this a couple times, but it was pretty early on. What does not null, Peter? Not exactly. Not exactly. Not. There's a big difference between not and null. Null means there's nothing in it. Not means not. Okay. Doesn't mean not set, David. And not yet, anyway. It means just not. It's the opposite. There we go. Exactly, Simon. It's the opposite. So I'm going to say, but now I'm going to make it not set because I'm going to add is set, and I'm going to say condat, and because condat is an array, that means we have to say condat what, and I'm going to use this, I'm going to say, we're going to do first purchase date. I'm going to say if condat first purchase date is not set, okay, then little curly brackets, we want to do this. We want to update the following. Update is going to be an array, and the things that we want to update are first purchase date, we're updating first purchase date to what? Current date. Nope, not even current date. We're using, because it has to be in what format? It has to be in this format, right? So we are updating it to iDate, meaning Infusionsoft date. Okay, so there's our array called update. We want to update first purchase date to Infusionsoft date, which is the current date. I'm assuming, by the way, the scenario is that this is getting called as a purchase action in your campaign builder, and you're going to set the first purchase date in a custom field called first purchase. But obviously, you don't, every time they buy, you aren't going to reset it. So you look first if it exists. If it's not there, then you want to set it with the current date. Okay, so then we're going to actually do the call to do that. So we're going to echo con ID equals our connection arrow update con is the call, and update con requires a contact ID to be updated, and what do we want updated, and a semicolon to close it. So at the moment there is nothing in well, I'm going to keep going actually. There's nothing in first purchase date because I took it out. So in theory, this should update because there's nothing there. We know the only thing that's there is an anniversary. Okay, now so let me just keep going because we're going to do exactly the same thing, and just to save time, since we're late, we're going to do this. No, we're not. We're going to do something close to this. I'm going to change. Now, this is one way to do it, but this is actually extraneous. This is set because really what I can do is just and you'll see this a lot actually. It took me a while to like catch on to this. A lot of times, so what I'm actually doing is it's just all we're saying is we're not even having to specify as set. We're just saying not. If condate, not for first purchase, this one, if humanized webinar date is not, meaning, oops, well, I could have put it there too. It's basically the same as is set, but it's just saying, does it exist? Oh, it doesn't exist. It's not. Therefore, if it's not, doesn't exist, then we're going to update that to this thing that I created called webhuman date, right? Same thing. And then the last one, so these are the same thing. They do the same thing. They've just got, for whatever it's worth, slightly less characters if you care. But the main reason I did it, because I actually usually write it that way, is so that if you ever saw it, you wouldn't be like, wait, what does that mean? Just not. And then here's the last one is anniversary. So we're going to do that, and I'm going to copy and paste that here. And so if that doesn't exist, now notice what I did. Remember, we've talked about this a bunch of times. Functions, which is basically what an API call is, return something. And the variable names that these are assigned to in the documentation give you a hint about what is going to get returned. Update contact, if it is successful, returns the contact ID that it just updated. So if these are successful, what you will see is you should see it come back and return 133 every time it does an update. So given the fact that we've already got a date in anniversary and we're saying if anniversary isn't set, update, we should actually only see 2 because it shouldn't be updating anniversary. It should only be updating these 2. Does that make sense to everybody? Is everybody following that? I hope. I know I'm starting to talk fast now. Okay, well, good. All right, so let's try it and see what happens. So nested dog, okay, just to confirm, contact fields are empty. Perfect, so let's go, save. Oh no, come on. I just need you to get through 2 more minutes. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to me? Anniversary. No, anniversary needs a year as well. It needs a full date. There it goes. Oh, and of course I got an error. Line 183. What did I miss? You guys, what did I miss? Okay. Unexpected curly bracket. Which means I didn't close something. Here's what I missed. There's a parentheses that I'm missing right there. And one right there too. Now try. Okay. See? 2 133s. And that is because it updated these 2 fields. Now, if I run it again, what I'm going to do first actually is show you that it updated those 2 fields. So now if I go to custom fields, 1/18/2014 is in 6:30 p.m. and my human date is now in the humanized. Oh wait, sorry. I know you can't see that. There we go. Sorry. Right here. So now if I run this again, what should happen is you should, number one, this array should show you that there's 3 here and we should see no 133s, right? So run it again. See, these were already there, therefore there is nothing. It doesn't return an error, it just says because it didn't even run. There was nothing to echo when it said if these don't exist. Oh no, they already are set. So just skip past that. Go to the next line of code. Okay? So that's how you say this is useful whether you're setting a date or not. This idea of if a field in Infusionsoft is set, don't write over the top of it. But if it's not, go ahead and write something in there. So you update, you do a load and then an update if it's not set. Okay, and I'm going to do one last thing really quickly, and then we're going to be done. So the last thing I want to do is I just want to show you guys because I think this is also fairly handy. This is another one of those. I'm just going to cut and paste. Plus this things that you can have them do in their plugin, but it's just with date diff, it's super simple. So what we already know, because we're already pulling it in this here, it is we know the date of first login, which is our anniversary date, and we know the date of first purchase because it's the first purchase date. So let's just say, for example, that I wanted to send a, well, this would be more for reporting because they've already purchased, or maybe they haven't purchased in a while or whatever. I mean, there's loads of reasons. You've heard, if you've ever heard my webinars about recency, frequency, monetary RFM analysis. The recency part of RFM is all about date diff, right? How long has it been since they did something, with the idea that people are more likely to purchase when they've done it more recently, right? So you use date diff all the time to figure out how recently have they done something. And all I'm going to do here is take first login and first purchase and use that date interval format to pull those numbers and just say it's just taken this long for, it's taken 46 days for this person from the time they first logged in to the time they made their first purchase, which was today. It's taken them 46 days. Things like that are, I mean, I think I don't really have to tell you all the things, all the ways that you might use dates, because as I say, they're probably the thing that I use the most if I really sat down and thought about it. So I saved them for last because not only are they a little bit tricky, but I knew that by now we would have all of our other components. We've done strings and variables and arrays and all these things, and so now we could actually really do some justice to dates. So hopefully, had I done them in the beginning, I don't think they would have really made that as much sense as hopefully they did today. Whew, all right, so 15 minutes passed, but hopefully that 15 minutes was time well spent, and I will be happy to take any questions. If you guys need to drop off, that's fine, but I don't want to just like um, run off without answering any questions. So anyone have any questions they like answered before we go? Peter, did you figure out your tag thing? No, not yet. Okay, if you would like some help with that, just let me know. I'm gonna go to dinner, and but then I'll be back, and I know it's your morning, so good. Ramona, these things, these took a while for me to sink in. So, but I think, hopefully my goal was to make a good enough handout that you could probably go back and at least find close to what you needed, and if not, then enough to go to the PHP manual and at least know what you were looking for. So hopefully that will help. And as you use these over and over again, you will be surprised. I will just say one other thing, by the way. I spent hours on this today. This piece right here, this is really kind of like the essence of 80/20 programming right here. And it really speaks to the idea that when you're first starting out, you don't really care about how clean your code is. You just really want to get stuff done. But the more you do it and the more you know how it's supposed to be done, and that you're not really doing it that way. And this is an example of that. And I ran out of time. I could not get it figured before class, but I will. So this, I mean, again, it's 200 lines of code. This takes milliseconds to execute, but the idea of executing this update 3 times is just really not very elegant. The right way to do it was to build, because each time we're building this array called update. And if I was doing it by just manually, I would have written one long array with all 3 of these fields in the same array. But I couldn't quite figure out how to build. There's all kinds of functions: array fill, array merge, array fill with key, bunches of them, and I was playing and playing and playing, and then I was so close, but I couldn't get it exactly like this. Uh, and I gave up. But eventually I will get it to that. And so it would be like three pieces, each one of these. If it doesn't exist, it adds it to the array, the update array, and then at the end runs this one update connection. So like I said, if anyone gives me a hard time about the fact that I called 3 times, I'm going to say tough, right? It's 200 lines. But really now I know. I would have not have known that in the beginning. And so my point being, Ramona, specifically about, needing to rewatch, the whole key to this is it's a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. And, the quicker you start to spot, I couldn't have found a missing parentheses to save my life in the beginning. That might have taken me an hour. But now I've just done it. I start to see patterns and it's like, oh, I'm missing a parentheses. So the key to it is to do it. Just do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. Find little projects, and those will help you so much, even if it's something little tiny, just to like play. I Ramona is asking me how long have I been at this. So I started. Well, it's been under 2 years. I was in the 2000. I was in the second ICC class, which was 2000 October 2011. When I went to that ICC class and took the test, I had never opened Infusionsoft. Honest to God, I had never been in the application, and Kara didn't want me to come to the class. I know, but the thing was, Ramona, I actually am a really long time Salesforce user. My company's run on Salesforce for like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. And even though it's not the same, it's kind of the same idea. So I knew what it could do. All I had to do was be able to find the button that did it. And so, yeah, Kara was certain that I was like, should not be in that class, but I did. I like passed the test with like a 94 or something, and became an ICC, and the rest is history. I think I started like really like wrote my first script, started trying to learn it. I don't know. It was probably like 5 or 6 months later, kind of the spring of 2012. So, but I really got serious about it maybe a year ago, something like that. So that's how long I've been doing this. So if I can do it, you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. That's the key. Any other questions? I didn't mean to bore you with stories. Good. So here's my last point. I'm going to let you guys go. I made it before. Richard Musty, thank you so much for your review on the marketplace, and that is what I'm going to ask everyone else if I can find it. I actually put my link to myself in the marketplace on your handout. And I would ask you, if you wouldn't mind, if this has been helpful to you, would you please write a review for me on the marketplace? I would really appreciate that. Thank you, Ramona. I thank you for that. All right, that's it. You guys, you're on your own. Last class on Tuesday. We're gonna do error handling is going to be the big thing. Couple of other little wrap up thing and your final questions, and then we'll be done. And then we're going to move on and do Thursday back to extending Infusionsoft. We're going to do Gravity Forms and how to link Gravity Forms to Infusionsoft without a plugin. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. I'm going to go have dinner with my husband, and I will see you guys all on Tuesday.